Welcome back to the Harmony Ball podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Post-Collegiate Choral Experience. Access to an arts community during our professional and later years is a highly gratifying and emotionally stabilizing human experience. Yeah, for thousands of people around the world, Barbershop Harmony creates friendship and fellowship through vocal music and performance. Join us in a song. On this episode, Kari Francis. Kari is a joyful practitioner of vocal music. She is a director and an arranger. She lives in New York and she is about to start her doctorate studies. So our conversation is, as we say out here on the West Coast, pretty heady, man. In our conversation, we have a very lively discussion of so many cool ideas, many of them interdisciplinary, which I love because cross-cultural pollination is so very interesting and, yeah, pretty relevant for growing this thing we call barbershop harmony culture. Kari Contralto Francis, welcome to the Harmony Ball podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It was funny. I was just listening to your lovely interview with Sarah Clay Lindvall, and she describes being a barber brat. And I know that that's a thing in the barbershop community. And I'm so jealous of it. I'm so envious of that kind of musical upbringing with that kind of community. I had one that was slightly different, and I hesitate to say nerdy because I think we're all in this delightfully nerdy space, but it was my dad's Renaissance a cappella group. So
Ooh, Renaissance
stay with me
acapella
there.
group. Okay, how many voices are in this? So you're gonna teach me so much, I think, in this chat
Oh my
about
gosh, I'm
Renaissance
not
and early
sure.
music because I don't know much before blues and jazz. I listen to classical radio, but anyway, your dad got you into vocal music, and it was a Renaissance ensemble.
It sure was. But I'll just say I'm not sure I'll be able to teach you anything, but that's very kind of you to say. Yeah, it was usually like, your typical 4 to 5 voices, a mix of like Italian and English Renaissance, a little bit of French thrown in there as well. But it was, in retrospect, pretty interesting because he was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and I think in every other part of his life was, pretty strict and austere and kind of aloof, still like a very loving father. Like, all that was great. But he had this one kind of outlet. And I feel like maybe barbershop occupies a similar space for a lot of people where it's this one, fabulously musical, expressive, creative hobby. And, I will say I have these memories as a child of going to Renaissance fairs, and there was my dad and, all of his friends, and they were in just full garb. They had really gone in on these costumes. Like that was really another member of the
Oh, I
group.
love those costumes at the Renaissance fair.
Oh yeah, and it was, and they really go for like as much authenticity as they can manage. Like my dad was the pitch pipe person, but he had a little wooden recorder that he would play. And I, can think back and really see how special it was to him and how much for granted I took it at the time. But what beautiful thing happened was that, so many of those people, they were around the same age and they all had kids who were about my age. So there eventually ended up being this youth ensemble, which I think was just as kind of a way.
Dress the kids up and make them entertain us this time.
For sure. And to not have to, and to not have to hire a babysitter on rehearsal night. I think that it all tied together in a way that, was really fortuitous for all of us. So I got my start singing a cappella in really this, more traditional format. And again, looking back, I'm so thankful for it now. At the time, I, didn't really understand it and didn't know, how maybe common or not common that was. And we were lucky in my little hometown, we had this local Shakespeare festival. So in the summer, all, those two ensembles would partner with whatever shows were being presented. And we would be the like before show or between acts, like entertainment and things like that. And it was just this odd little collection of musical and creative things that made up this fun ecosystem that happened to be where I grew up. So that was the start of things, but I never envisioned really taking it any further than that.
So you were part of a musical community through your family that wasn't barbershop, but was similarly dressed and cultured in like some aesthetic which tied people in a community together.
That's a really nice way to sum it up. I think you're exactly right. And I
And
think
then
you
that
can take
transfers
those
to barbershop
parallels.
too, right?
Exactly. Right.
Oh,
We're
that's so
almost one
rad.
for one, I feel like. Yeah.
Connection.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. What a cool life. What a cool upbringing. What happened to the other people in your ensemble?
Oh my gosh. I mean, some of them pursued music, some of them didn't. Some of them are music teachers. I mean, I feel like it's also similar to a typical barbershop group where there are people who are at maybe different levels of their ability to incorporate music in their lives, and you see how an ensemble like that can really be so pivotal and so important, not just for their musical selves, but really how that ties back into their well-being as a whole person. So
Whoa.
everyone really took something out of it that they needed, and where they've ended up career wise, I think just had to do with ultimately what they wanted to get paid for, and so some have chosen music and some haven't, which is a
Oh, I
really
see.
ambiguous answer
No,
to say that maybe
that's cool.
half
Well,
have and half haven't.
that's good. Yeah, I mean, I oh, I got to tell you, by the way,
Mm.
I ran into someone from high school yesterday who I sang in a
Ooh,
jazz choir with. So, I guess, do you run into these people that you grew up going to Renaissance fairs and performing for your parents as, or
oh my gosh.
or with?
That would be amazing if people had that kind of like institutional memory, which I know in the barbershop community is a thing. And maybe we
Oh,
can keep talking about that
wow.
there is such a like
So
a
lexical.
building.
You're like a PhD with the words over here.
Oh man.
What's it called again?
Hopefully someday. Oh my gosh.
Collective memory? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and like sort of where you find the overlap, like where the Venn diagram of like the style as institution, if you want to call that, as embodied by the BHS and other organizations, and then the community that really keeps it alive, like maybe the more organic element or manifestation of those organizations. And I feel like you have, yeah, some of those parallels with something like Renaissance or even pirate fairs, like things like that still embody this kind of performative identity and sort of the musical styles that you can incorporate as part of that. And you find people who, in the context of that are revealing, for a weekend or whatever it is, a whole side of themselves that, maybe they don't really get to embody throughout the week. I feel like barbershop and a cappella and really group singing in general seems to encapsulate something like that to me seems pretty magical. And I guess that's why I kind of keep coming back to it.
Oh, performative identity is so super magical, 100%. That's like the good, 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 good stuff about being human. I mean,
Oh yeah.
isn't that like what it's all about? Making art with people so you can have this like, woo, who was it that won in 2001? Was it the Side Street New Boys?
Oh my
Just the
gosh.
collective
The
memory of
sides.
sitting around drinking and talking about days of yore with people. That's kind of a good human experience, eh?
Oh yeah. It makes me think of if I can just like steal the conversation on my own personal tangent, which you are a captive audience to. Um, like my first
I'm Michael
AIC
Jackson eating
show.
popcorn. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're just yeah, I am the screen just like blaring at you. No, I remember the first AIC show I went to. I think that was my first. This would have been like 2011. I think the first convention I went to international was getting a sense not only of like these histories and in jokes and like these kind of rolling inside bits that get like repeated and codified and sort of recreated. Like the thing is, watching a video from like the Newfangled Four or something. It's like watching that now, having been around a couple of barbershop events throughout the years and seeing, oh, like there are elements of that are really ripples of things from 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago. And like that's kind of the fun of a style that is, for better or worse, some of the stricter elements also bring to bear, I think, some of these ideas that get repeated and have to be recreated and approached in interesting ways, I guess. And so I think there's something really exciting about that. And I guess with any group that has a historically informed practice, there's going to be an element of that, of sort of the artful recreation of whoever is there in the present trying to find a way to represent that same material.
Oh yeah, I love a good historical ripple. Yeah, Ripple On,
Oh my
artists.
gosh. Oh yeah, for sure. But
Ooh,
seeing the
yeah.
things that people laughed at and realizing, oh, like this is a kind of laughter, like something about even just the character of what was being laughed at. You could tell that it was a joke that had been around for a long time. And not that the joke was tired or played out. I don't mean it like that. I mean, like this is a thing that this whole community of many generations and like many countries and many people coming to the same concert from so many places, they're all connecting in this one way, and they all know why this thing is funny, why this funny chord or why this funny lyric change. They understand the historical implications in barbershop lore as to like why that's significant.
Oh
And
my
you can
God,
tell
so cozy.
they're
Such a
oh
cozy
so
human
cozy.
experience.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So
Yeah. Keep
thinking of
telling me
shows
why
like that.
barbershop's so great. And I want to know more about also this
Oh my
Renaissance
gosh.
fair thing because I want to hear
Oh
because
man.
I'm trying to we need to grow this thing, so we have to figure out like what to culturally appropriate from other
Yeah.
successful
Ah,
organizations that make the arts, and what we can share
interesting.
in return, of course. Because I think what you're pointing out, if I understand you, is one of the beautiful things about this music that we make is that it's part of a culture that has a collective identity which we can recall in the live performance, and that's so gratifying and wonderful. And we all kind of have that in all arts organizations, but kind of different in like different ways. And I'd be curious to know what you see that we could incorporate into the culture that we don't have yet, in addition to the things that we do have.
That's a really interesting, and it's a really salient point. And I have the feeling our conversation's going to move there. And as you were saying the first part of that question, I was thinking back to how lucky I was to get such a wonderful introduction to barbershop through, I think, a mutual friend of ours whose name is Will Harris, who I'm sure you know very well.
I love Will.
As do I. He is simply one of the best humans I know. And again, kind of like looking back on my childhood and singing with this group, I can look back and say, oh, how, again, how fortunate I was for someone like Will, who I
Did you go to
know is
school with Will?
I did not. I sure wish I had. That would have been great. But our a cappella groups in college butted heads a couple times.
Oh,
So
rivalry. Okay, you got to tell me about the
indeed,
rivalry.
indeed. Well, I think we'll get to that and kind of the a cappella tie-in, which I think ultimately is going to connect to the answer to your question that you've asked. So if you'll come with me on this journey to get to that answer.
Okay, I'm coming.
Um,
Coming.
but no, I don't mean to. Again, I'm not trying to make you a captive audience member now. But no, I think I was graduating in 2011. I don't know if that makes me too old from college, and entering into this really crazy filming experience for this a cappella competition show called the Sing Off, and I had uh, met Will, and we had talked about barbershop, and I'd been to a Westminster rehearsal, and again just had this really lovely introduction to barbershop that I look back now and think that was incredible. That was just like a lightning strike. And I think I watched American Harmony about 50 times. And you think that's hyperbole? It's really not. And that summer went to again that first international that I'd mentioned before. Um, and and the experience of being there, and I was just an idiot, I think, going to a city I'd never been to. I didn't really know anyone. I met a couple of a cappella people who I knew would be there. So I wasn't totally alone, but getting there and realizing like, oh my gosh, like I don't know anything about barbershop. Like I like to sing, but I don't, these people really care about tuning. I'm not sure I know how to tune very well. Like their standards seem really high in that department. And then just like getting totally just, pulled into singing a tag with, a quartet of total strangers who were just so welcoming and so clearly were there for the music. And I think about in my own directing and teaching, like that just ultimate passion and really like, harmony nerd love of locking chords is something that I've really tried to carry forward and tried to share as best I could, in my own limited capacity. Really through the magic of singing tags and singing anything where you could really like hone in on how to tune, like, that nice minor seventh in a dominant chord, just getting it nice and low, stuff like that, where, there's just kind of an unmistakable, visceral, physical reaction to what it means for a chord to tune a certain way. And it's kind of odd that it seems like such a small granular thing, and yet I feel like there's so much love that comes out of even just that tiny experience, just multiplied by all the times those happen in arrangements, and all the quartets that are singing them and sharing them. And then to see on top of that, people who I had just seen in this documentary that I just been watching, walking around, and just the absolute, I say this as someone who's been to Comic-Con a couple times, and Anime Expo and Fanime, seeing the people who run up to their absolute heroes, and they get to sing a tag with them. Like, there is this exchange that you mentioned. It's not just kind of the one way sort of observer like street. Like, there really gets to be this kind of give and take of sharing in a craft.
Ooh, yeah, the
And
give and take. So good with this community, with the sharing
yeah.
of the craft.
Oh
100%.
yes. But then I think, to your question ultimately, and sorry to kind of keep meandering around it, how do you multiply that out or expand that web out to those who maybe aren't necessarily here for a particular singing style, but maybe just singing in general? How do you still capture the magic that is barbershop while also expanding the net to encompass things that might just more generally fall under a cappella, but
Great
at the same
question.
time, yeah.
Yeah, I got to hear this answer because it's a good buildup.
I'm not sure I have an answer, but if I could offer a simple observation, I guess it would just be that there's something in the chorus, like the chorus as a locus of community and sharing and exchange, and ultimately, like, fraternity, sort of in the a gender neutral sense, but of siblinghood, of familyhood, with people who are joined together in some sort of singular purpose. And that seems to come together at a level that is technically hobby, technically amateur, in the best sense of the word, of doing something like to love it. That I've seen just go to the nth degree in barbershop choruses. That seems a little bit different from post-collegiate a cappella groups and community choirs and things like that, who those ensembles are still great. They still strive for and achieve really wonderful things. But there's something about the post-collegiate chorus that I guess I wish could catch fire a little bit more, that I feel like barbershop choruses have set up this really nice template for. And you talk about intergenerationality and other ways of connecting a community through song that doesn't have to be just your grade level in college, or that surrounding 4 years, or just your religious institution, or just whatever. It's like, how many swaths or how many demographics can you cut across to really begin to bring those together? And I'm not saying that barbershop necessarily has all the answers either. None of us do. But I feel like I've witnessed the most intense and unified striving in the barbershop courses that I've been lucky to observe rehearsals of.
Yeah.
It's a very wandering
Singular
answer.
purpose. You had me at singular purpose because I feel like that describes very well what makes the post collegiate chorus so special, because you're left in a void when you graduate from a university or when you pass a milestone in your
Oh,
life,
for sure.
because it's been about this thing, getting through high school, getting through college, getting through whatever it is, the big promotion, the pregnancy, the parents' death, all these big milestones in life. And then there's this void. And it's where that's where the community really has so much value. And the post-collegiate experience plus barbershop music, I would agree with you 100%. That is a very fertile place because of the diversity available in your community. And I think, to answer what you're musing at, absolutely, you can get the entire spectrum of society in that chorus. And that's what's so incredible about it, because it's suddenly bigger than anything. It's like, what could possibly be bigger than this university experience that I've been having? Say you're graduating as a senior and you're 22, 21 years old or something like that, and you have this it's like a what's the right word here? I don't know. You're better with the words. So keep
Oh, I don't
talking.
know
You
about
were
that.
talking great.
No, that was
Please keep
beautiful.
going.
I was about to ask what brought you to Westminster, or what brought you to barbershop,
Oh,
because you
just change the subject on me.
obviously.
Fine. Okay. Well, I found Westminster because I I mean, I'd always known that I loved barbershop through high school and college, but I didn't really have the access to people who were going to have the singular purpose of chasing the highest echelon that they possibly could go for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was really attractive to me. I remember thinking while joining the chorus all those many years ago, am I really good enough to do this?
Oh.
Do I have the work ethic to make this happen? Do I have the skills, the technique to do this? And I really thrive in that environment. I like feeling like a little bit quicksand below the feet, or how do I say this? Feeling like it's kind of a sink or swim, or like it's go time, sort of a this you have to put in the work or you're not going to belong to this thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that because I think those experiences might be more rare than we would like to admit in this life.
Wow. I feel like you've answered your question better than I ever could, which is, yeah, how do we find these spaces of the wonderful emotional immediacy that is striving for something that, like you said, maybe we don't quite feel like we're ready for. In educational philosophy, we might call this the zone of proximal development, right? So it's like,
Whoa! Oh my God! Hold on, let me get
oh,
my pen. The zone. Slow down. The zone of proximal development.
but exactly what it means, right? You're in just the right place where something is just out of grasp, and you're working with someone like a director like Justin, who is of course, just so wonderful, who has the skills and sees where you are and knows, just how to nudge you beyond where you might have, arrived just by your own power. And it's not to say that you were lacking anything, but they happen to have, the perspective or the skill or the experience to get you there and ultimately empower you to get to a new place. And I think we're always looking for those things, hopefully. Oh,
100%. Yeah. Justin sent me a book once about how the physiology of the body works when it's learning how to do a skill and the myelinated sheath that comes down from the brainstem and into your nervous system and all that jazz.
whoa. Talk about
Yeah.
words.
Yeah, so many words in this book. And I think Justin's favorite subject in this book, I forget the title of it, is about sports. So it's
Mhm.
like hard for me to recall because I don't have a big file in my brain called sports. But like the guy who like coached the basketball team that was like really good at UCLA, don't remember his name. Listeners are like yelling the name of this really very famous celebrity basketball coach that is referenced in this book, and I should know this anecdote well. But the point is that the message and the science relayed in this book is something along the lines of what makes that coach so brilliant, and this parallels to the compliment you're paying Justin, is that you as a coach, as an educator, as somebody who's improving a team, there's a way to do that that's in concert with how the brain fires signals into the body and
Mm.
myelinates the sheath in the neurons such that you remember how to do it easier. And that coaching skill is like some cool science to know. And I should brush up on this anecdote, but yeah, that is like what you reminded me of when you said that.
That's very cool. I did a quick Google, and I'm wondering if John Wooden is.
Oh, that's it.
Does that come to
Wooden.
mind?
That's the
All
dude.
right. That's not a name I would have come up with, sadly. I'm in the
Oh,
same
good.
boat. I'm not super sports literate, but just for the fans of the podcast who were shouting that thing, we got you.
This is great. I got a guest who's brilliant, uses words super good, gonna get that octagon hat, and knows how to Google stuff when I don't know the answer. This is great.
Oh my gosh. I got to say, there's a strong correlation between the octagon hat and being able to Google things. So don't give me too much credit there. Oh man, that's really cool though. And I think that is so, I love that you described that. That is such a rare skill, and one that um I feel like I embarrassingly have only, really begun to realize how much that should really be a bigger priority. And I feel like as a teacher in particular, or as any kind of performance coach, I've spent so much time, Derek, worrying about knowing the thing to fix or knowing what was wrong and how to call it out. And like, yes, that is a part of the process, but ultimately that like ability to inspire, that ability to ultimately like keep them wanting to get better, whoever that is, whoever you're working with. and never letting that flame go out. If anything, really helping to ignite it further, needs to be at the center of everything. And, without that, you've driven someone away from music who, hopefully you had hoped to keep into it, and or keep singing. And that's so that coaching ability, or that directing ability, that ability to draw someone that much further from the place they already were, is just so golden. So that's very cool, and very jealous that you
100% golden,
Justin, because I feel like I'm jotting down notes all the times I've come to your rehearsals and lurked in the corner. I've just been scribbling notes constantly because, of course, everything he does is just so on point.
He's pretty good at doing the old directing, eh?
Yeah, he's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because he reads these books about John Wooden.
Wooden, exactly. And that mylar?
The myelinated sheath.
I like mylar more. I'm going to go with that.
Okay. Yeah, these are all very big words. I don't usually use these words. In fact, I'm really trying to be smarter than I actually am. And
I need to do the reading up.
Yeah, it's. I have some notes in front of me. Maybe I can pull some from our last conversation.
Oh yeah.
I want to know more about sacred music. Can you tell me? Can we get back to you teaching me about your discipline, this Renaissance sacred music that you come from? Because that is some cool stuff.
It is super cool stuff. I mean, I am a joyful practitioner, and I guess hopefully in a couple of years I can call myself more expert. So I think we probably share a pretty equal love of it. What's fun, especially if you can combine it with, if I'm sure you took maybe some music history classes, like there are all these little strands you can follow kind of across the European continent if you're looking specifically at like the Italian and English Renaissance of, for example, there's a famous piece, Il Bianco, Il Dolce and that became The Silver Swan by Gibbons. It's like certain pieces or certain ideas around kind of different subject matter or ways to write around it kind of got picked up by different composers and artists and sort of found their own ways to sort of permute. And ultimately, there was kind of like, the top 40, that was like the hit parade, right? It just, it took a couple decades or centuries for those ideas to get around. But it's so interesting to think about rehearsing, especially if you think of removing the piano from the equation and thinking specifically of voices and pitch references that have more to do with what we would call just intonation, as you well know, of basically removing equal temperament references, and tuning the way, voices and string instruments in particular tend to find really resonant frequencies and, kind of these popping of overtones in certain places. Is really fun. It's fun to think about those things, and especially if you're dealing, as so often we are with choruses, with amateurs, and again, amateur in the most wonderful sense of the word, of these loving volunteers who are here for it, which I would take that over a pro chorus any day. Thinking of ways to really make those musical gems come to life. In ways that also really honor the style that they come from. And I feel like that's a fun way to find that parallel between things like early and medieval music, which, of course, have other stylistic implications and fun ways to like improvise, and, musica ficta and things like this that have their own little rules. And you find certain comparisons and sort of complementary ideas in the barbershop world with how certain things are done, where a tiddly is put in a baritone line, or like where a kind of rubato movement might be, introduced on a particular word or chord in order to really let that ring for a while because it's a really cool voicing, things like that. So I feel like there are really so many very cool parallels. And I guess I bring this up ultimately because as a choral person who's sort of in between these worlds, I feel like I've encountered these interesting perspectives of being considered the barbershop person by my non-barbershop colleagues, but I'm not quite a barbershopper in terms of like, I'm not a barbershop brat, or I'm not in an award-winning quartet or things like that. But in this between worlds where I think there's a respect for barbershop and really for like amateur community singing, but the barbershop style in particular. And I think also just some misinterpretations or misunderstandings around how much work really goes into it. and how hard it really is to do and to do well. And I feel like one of the things I hope to convey is just greater understanding and hopefully greater respect, kind of across those choral lines, and really getting into, more professional or semi-professional choral spheres, having barbershop really be a part of those. And I know in a lot of places it already is, which is fantastic. And I guess I hope that that trend continues to keep expanding and sort of become more standard in the future. I don't know. Have you experienced the same thing? Do you feel like barbershop's really catching on in more professional choral spheres? Or do you feel like there's still some hesitation to accept it?
Oh, I really don't know how to answer that question. I'm more excited about you being at the proximal development boundary between barbershop and your colleagues who consider you to be the barbershop person, but in your mind, you're more like, well, I'm not really in like an award-winning group, but I do like barbershop a lot, and I see these corollaries because this is like the big opportunity. I was going to say problem, but this is the big opportunity for the society to find these conduits into adjacent spaces on the
Ooh.
proximity of these arts. And you're on one of them, and that's like rad. To answer your question honestly, I don't really have a gauge on this type of stuff. I'm not a cruise ship
Mm.
entertainer, so like when people request Queen, I'm like, great, a song that has complicated harmony in it. Or like when I get complimented on like using jazz harmony to like make a country tune sound less
Mm.
1/4/5,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, oh, cool, you get it. But like, as far as like, I forget exactly what your question was. How well adopted? Can you restate the question you had for me, please?
Yeah, well, and I wish I had more data points to support it either way, just to kind of keep things flowing. Because I feel like when so a little more kind of anecdotal backstory, I feel like when I describe barbershop to, I'm in New York, as you know, and I sometimes cross paths with contemporary classical musicians who also deal with like really finite tuning and like microtones
Oh
and
my God, do you know Caroline Shaw?
I'm actually going to go see a concert of hers next week. Yeah,
Because
just
I saw
like,
her playing violin on the internet, and she had tomato plants, and I thought
eh,
that was so nice.
oh, heck yeah. Oh, she's fantastic. Well, and yeah, any interested fans should check out her Partita, which was the Pulitzer Prize winning piece. She's uh, written a lot of other things. She just had a really cool album with Attaca Quartet come out. Yeah, tons of cool stuff. I mean, again, if you want your just intonation, there you go. So cool. Yeah. But that
Perfectly
being the
tuned
thing,
notes. Yeah.
perfectly tuned. Well, and it's like you describe barbershop to them, the idea of like the tuning systems in particular, and even some of the progressions, like what we might think of like, oh, this is old fashioned, or maybe I don't even feel like I know a lot historically about this music. Describing it to someone outside of it, who deals with that kind of tuning, I've more often than not gotten the response of like, that sounds so cool. Like, where's the collaboration? Where can we like get this going? So I guess I want to believe that, that those conversations can happen more. And I think we just somehow, I think back to your original question, Derek, finding the spaces where we can ask those questions of, oh my gosh, of the non-barbershop ensemble saying like, that is so cool. How can we do something together? Um, and I feel like that sort of cross pollination is going to be really key in the future. And it's going to be a question of whether a style like barbershop or a style like certain types of medieval music, or certain a cappella, decides that they want to maybe break out of what they've been in the past. And that's not to say that they abandon where they've been, but certainly that music is something that is so beautiful in the way that it evolves, especially popular music, especially in the United States, as we've seen. So I feel like there's so much opportunity there for styles to talk to each other and really begin to bounce off each other in more ways.
Yes, exactly. Let's get some work commissioned next year in Brooklyn.
Hell yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah, what would that be like?
Oh my gosh.
What are your
Well,
ideas?
call up Caroline Shaw.
Okay.
Honestly, I do feel like that you could, there is a whole pool of especially choral composers who work with contemporary classical music, as Caroline happens to do. And I don't mean to speak for her, but just because she's on both of our radars, which is so cool. Um, I'm so curious in a really delightful way to know how they might interpret, if they were to listen to a bunch of barbershop albums or something like that, and then kind of spin their own piece with their
Ooh, yeah,
own
that does
take
sound
on
good.
that.
Let's
Wouldn't
totally
that be
get that to
wild?
happen. Oh, it'd be
Oh my
so
gosh,
good.
that
Oh
would
my
be the
God.
coolest commissioning series. Oh my golly. It reminds me, and not to spin this tangent a little bit more in my direction, but I
You spin
got
away.
I'll spin. You can cut it out later if it's too
Okay.
boring.
No, I don't do that. No, I don't edit these.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
No, no
Sorry,
editing.
listener.
Off the
Well,
cuff.
off the cuff, indeed. Well, there's speaking of those same composers who also tend to be performers as well, which is very cool. You mentioned Caroline performs. I think she's a violist, I want to say, and a vocalist in Roomful of Teeth, and I'm sure tons of other things. I got to work a little while ago now, pre-pandemic, with a really fabulous composer, pianist, experimental musician named Corey Smythe, and he did what sort of began as an a cappella album that came to include his sort of detuned piano and some really cool kind of looping mixing things. And so that was really interesting. If you want to check it out, it's called Accelerate Every Voice, which I think is a play of Lift Every Voice. And specifically, there's an Andrew Hill album called Lift Every Voice, and he just that whole album is super super strong, really really inspiring, really interesting stuff. And so Corey played on some of that, and I also sent him a bunch of pop a cappella stuff and some barbershop, and so he's kind of bouncing off of those references as well. He has kind of a parody of the Whiff and Poof song in there, which, if you know, the Whiff and Poofs were sort of the first Ivy League male a cappella group.
They wore sweaters. They were sweater guys. Wore the same outfit.
Were they sweaters? I think they might have been the height of the sweater look. Is definitely it's very like New England. Yeah, but I think they in particular, they have like the white tie, the bow tie, and like white gloves, and then tails, like kind of the most formal iteration. But the sweaters definitely come in. Like there is that kind of classic collegiate look, and maybe they've also done that at some point. But you're definitely onto it. There is like a classic kind of, again, if thinking of like male fraternal societies, especially at like sort of the collegiate level, and how that ties into barbershop in particular, there is that kind of look for sure. No, you're onto it.
Looks are silly. I was trying to make a silly joke, just to try to outline.
No, it was great. I wanted to tie it in.
Larger cultural
Oh my
stuff.
gosh.
But
No.
I listened to a Voices 8 recording that had a violin or a viola. No, cello. It was a cello with chorus, and it was so gorgeous. Just incredible.
Well,
I would love to hear. Sure. I would love to hear some cross pollination, to use your words, of barbershop choral music with like Appalachian fiddle style music in a contemporary context, but like more like what maybe Johnny Greenwood might use those instruments for. Like it's like I would love to hear barbershop music and it's like hobbyist aesthetic, but like painted in a more like metropolitan context for contrast. I don't know, something like I love contrast. I'm big into the contrast.
Yeah, no, that's great. Kind of sounds like you might have been listening to Pyramid Song by Vacha's Age. Does that ring a bell? Or...
No, that wasn't it. This was not
really?
Pyramid Song. But yeah, they had a cello in, I don't know the name of this title, but we should also promote your Corey Smythe music. I looked that up on the internet while you were speaking, and that looks pretty good too. The internet's just full of packed good stuff, but let's get back to this cross-pollination idea. So I really am excited about the idea of working in this proximate space. And that was just like that last stupid idea that I came up with about like contrast or whatever to sound smart. There's 1,000 other ways for us to like cross-pollinate barbershop with other like arts organizations. How do we grow this thing? I want to keep focusing us at this because... gosh, we just have to. It's so much fun. You know what I'm talking about. Going to these hotels and hanging out with like a bunch of nerds who like to tune chords. Like that's a lot of fun. We need more happy people that do that in this world.
It really is. And I gotta say, and I am so sorry that I haven't even mentioned to this point the Sirens of Gotham, who were so pivotal to my learning about barbershop, and they were so welcoming and so kind and letting me be one of their co-directors for a little while with the wonderful Mira Taferner. And we went to Harmony Classic. And so you were speaking of proximal spaces, and I think you used the word adjacent at one point. And I think you and I might have talked about the idea of a barbershop adjacent arrangement, and really kind of implying this spectrum of barbershopness that, at one end is maybe, maybe the strictest, most traditional, and maybe the most historical. And then, that contains maybe the contestable arrangements. And then getting slightly away from that, maybe allowing a little bit more for contemporary pop progressions that maybe have a little bit less, dominant tonic movement or circle of fifths movement, however you want to sort of describe that. Um, or melodies that, are easy to adapt to that, I guess. And, there's a spectrum where we get into, just maybe a really straightforward, current pop 4-chord progression. And can all of those be encompassed in this thing called barbershop rather than sort of giving way to another space? Like, is it possible for those to sort of all exist at a place like the BHS International or Sweet Adeline's, Harmony Classic or anything like that? And I think the answer is yes. And just to share a little bit of that, I guess my journey with that has been so fun and has been absolutely dependent upon collaborators like the Sirens of Gotham, who are so progressive, so forward thinking, and are so willing to take a risk on an arranger like me in helping kind of negotiate my pop background with their barbershop interests and finding a kind of happy middle ground. So to be more specific about that, for our contest set, and this was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, they let me arrange one of their tunes. And I think it was a Greatest Showman song. I want to say it was This Is Me. I think it was. I've just been listening back to that recently. So, all the songs from that musical are kind of blurring together. But all to say, I had an absolute blast. And I got to arrange this tune knowing that basically anything I put on the table was fair game. And it didn't even necessarily have to be 4 parts. It's like within the contest set, you could have your traditional song, more traditional, more contestable barbershop. And you could have sort of a lot around that might typically be called something like pop a cappella. And may or may not kind of dip its toe back into the barbershop style. And so trying to find a way to keep all of that stylistically cohesive and writing in some callbacks to the previous songs we sang in our set, things like that were just an absolute blast. And I felt like they were just really good sports and really put their faith in me to try to find a way to still make something that had its barbershop moments, even though it wasn't a barbershop tune, like it wasn't really barbershopable. But at the same time, still was able to retain the kind of core of the original song that it came from. So all to say, I know that there are those kind of experiments going on with other choruses and quartets, and at Harmony University, I know that there have been cool collaborations between Deke Sharon and David Wright, and I think things like that could definitely keep going. And I don't know if that's the answer to your question, but I think it could be a part of it for sure, those blurring and cross-pollinating.
Oh, thank you for that. That's a elegant solution. Kari, one of the things that I'm noticing as you're speaking is that you have a respect for these ripples and contextual references that you bring up often, which I really enjoy. What do you attributed that to? Your love for that arrangement style or that understanding of context?
Hmm, interesting. Oh, when you say, just to clarify, what an example of like a specific moment, or are you saying like these ripples of thinking back to, I think we were talking about the ripples of like jokes and things that are like known within the community. Are you saying that there's sort of an analogous part of that with like arrangements as well? Just want to make sure I'm understanding the question.
You were saying that you when you were arranging for Sirens, you were
Mm.
incorporating things in your arrangements that were referencing the context of the music that had come previous to it. And I was just asking
Ah,
to
gotcha.
poke at why that's part of your style, or maybe to broaden the question would be like, what is your approach to arranging? Do you have a way of thinking about it? Everyone has their own way of doing it. I would be curious to know how you approach a new commission and how your ability to put pen to paper has evolved as an artist over the years.
For sure. Oh, thank you for that. And so sorry, I didn't mean to kind of lose the original question as well.
I'm trying to
Because
get better at podcasting. Can you tell?
no, you're doing great. Oh no,
Okay.
it's more that I'm just like, "Bleh."
And also, can we take a break for a second? I have to use the restroom. Excuse me.
Of course, go
Okay,
for
I'll
it.
be right back. Okay, I'm back. Are you here?
Hooray! Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Okay, we'll edit out that silence. I can hear you very well.
Nice. Well, it was perfectly timed. It gave me time to think about your original question, which I think I was just kind of slow to sort of think back quickly enough to. So sorry about that.
That's fine. No
Um,
worries. Go ahead,
but
please.
I will, yeah. But it ties what you, I mean, both questions you asked tie into each other really nicely, which is that as especially working with groups like Sirens, but now a couple of other quartets and groups since then, um, thinking, I guess, exactly of what you said of those kind of recalls and finding consistencies that you can sort of help continue. Like, what are the threads that you can keep going in the new arrangement that you're making? And I think that's one of the bigger picture ideas that I've been trying to think of. So, for example, that Sirens contest set, of course, like recalling earlier things from earlier in the set in the end. And I was lucky, I had the easiest job, which was to, to do the final song. So I could really, recall any bits from previous songs that I wanted to. Um, and I think there's a larger theme of that, which is, yes, when you're arranging a song or when I'm approaching something, I think the biggest thing I think of, aside from the typical, like, how big is the group and, what are the singers and what are the strengths and, what are the things you want to bring out, is how do they want it to work in their set? But I think a bigger question or a bigger thing that's being discussed kind of implicitly whenever I'm having these conversations with a group is how, especially with barbershop groups, how is this song going to play into their history as an ensemble? Because if I do well, hopefully, if I deliver an arrangement that they like to sing, hopefully it'll stick around for a while, like hopefully for a couple of years, maybe if I'm lucky. So a question I'm asking myself is this chart true to the character of the ensemble? Like, does it feel like a space where they can be their authentic selves, or the selves that they have created, kind of crafted, whatever their identity as an ensemble is? Um, and so that is, again, something I'm striving for. I'm not saying that I'm totally nailing it every time,
Yeah,
but
but if you don't totally nail it, maybe you do the opposite side of the coin, which is to give them something
mm.
that's like so not who they are, and so they have to really work.
That's true. Yeah, it could be a good challenge musically. Maybe it helps them unlock something they hadn't quite considered that could be part of their image or their musical identity. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can come from that as well, for
Right, but they're
sure.
not going to want to buy that. They're going to want to buy you understand their singers and their ranges, in addition to the context the chart will be in the show, in addition to the context of their history as an ensemble. Wow, where do I write you a check? You're
Oh
great.
my gosh. Oh, shucks. Well, and then on top of that, to I think tie it back to sort of where we started this of really situating that chart, if you want to get that granular or zoomed out, however you want to think of it, in the history of sort of the styles that have given it rise. So if it happens to be a barbershop chart or even just a barbershop adjacent chart, what does that mean for the styles that it's mixing? And like, what has the trajectory of those been? And so I feel like getting back to thinking of, shows like the AIC show, or even just like the top 10 quartets, it's like they're, again, as someone who is still technically sort of outside of that, in but not quite in, I guess, I feel like I observe those performers not just musically and vocally, executing this really high degree of technical skill, but they're also walking such a fine line psychologically of what they are choosing to recall and what previous quartets or sets or tags or arrangements they point to. And there's such an interesting relationship with lineage. And I feel like, back to your question of like, what are these ripples? What are like the corollaries that you bring? I feel like that's such an interesting and really central thing to consider, especially in a style like the barbershop style. It's going to evolve, but it can't maybe do so by like cutting itself off from where it's been and going kind of cold turkey. Like there has to continue something in the echoes of itself for it to still feel like it's genuine.
Ooh, tough challenge. So awesome though.
Right.
Yeah. Cause to zoom out even further, there's like
Mm.
uh reasons to be trepidatious while picking my words right now regarding the history of the Barbershop Harmony Society and music in America in general, with
Oh,
white
for
people
sure.
appropriating the blues and so on.
Hmm.
But you can't just cut a culture off and say start from here, because the lineage and the things that we reach back to as ripples and quotes and references and contexts are like a big part of the kick of the music.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And if you want to go down this rabbit hole with me, really interesting to compare
I
with
do.
with popular acapella and collegiate acapella. And I'm not trying to gainsay or negate anything because I love those things with my whole heart. But I feel like one of the key differences I notice between those. It's all of 10:05 here. I guess I don't have an excuse for for slurred
It's
speech.
been a long
Uh,
day in the studio. I can see from your Zoom calls. Like,
oh gosh.
you've been rehearsing, working on
Oh
your
man.
German. Have you been working on your German, Kari?
I've been working on a little bit of German. Yes, yes,
That's exhausting
trying
because
to check that
that's a
box.
complicated language.
Indeed, yes. Es ist difficile.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, sorry. You should definitely edit that out. Oh,
No, you
but
don't have to be
really,
cool. Remember, we're talking to nerds. We're
this
all
is true.
we're all
This is
nerds here,
true.
baby. Come
Thank
on.
you. Thank you, nerds who are listening. We are one with you. But really, to try to elucidate this point of, I feel like this, and I think we mentioned this again at kind of the beginning, the idea of like an institution, and with that comes institutional memory. Um, or if you want to spread that out to just like a communal memory. And I feel like, tags are kind of the coolest musical manifestation of this kind of memory getting passed on. I feel like the collegiate a cappella sphere and even popular a cappella writ large, with some of the festivals and things, there are things that are remembered for a couple years, like maybe like 5 or 10 years of like, I can remember an amazing so jam that was, take six and naturally seven. It's like, I happen to remember that for that far back, but no collegiate student right now is going to know what I was talking about. Or even if I mentioned like, hey, remember when Pentatonics headlined Laugh right after the Sing Off season 3 stopped airing. It's like that was only only 10 years ago. And that's like, a barely a tiny ripple in the barbershop community, right? That they seem to remember really amazingly many, many more decades beyond that. So much so that I remember seeing, again, thinking back to that first international, I think it was Rural Route 4, singing Danny Boy. And, vocally, it was, I could tell that everyone watching was remembering something that was pretty different from what was being presented on stage. And that's not to say that there was anything bad. Like, it was still a really magical, beautiful performance. But as a demonstration of institutional or communal memory, those memories were truly stretching back decades. And that was a really wild phenomenon to see and realize that I didn't know of a correlate in collegiate a cappella, even though many of these collegiate groups have been around also for many decades, right? And some even, pushing a century or more. So something about that backwards looking, backwards knowing, generation passing on, we haven't quite nailed that, I feel like, in some choral communities outside of barbershop. And I'm not sure why that is. It's not to say that there aren't intergenerational choirs. I don't mean that. But something about knowing what has been done before and what has come before. Not just the fact that you're, singing Handel's Messiah again, but, who sang it when and who was the soloist and, what joke did he make at this moment. It's that capacity for remembering and knowing and understanding how those moments were important and what they mean for a group now to do something that references that. I'm still just trying to wrap my head around it. It's wild and it's so cool to observe.
Would you agree that there is a balance to be struck in this remembrance that we all are part of when we're a community of music makers, and that on a spectrum there might be pop music on the left and some maybe more conservative thinkers on the right? And when we find the balance and we're respectful to both types of value sets, we can really find a very comfortable place as a society to live.
Oh, for sure. I think there's no question. And I wonder if there is any hesitation or not fear, but I feel like there doesn't need to be any concern that you're not going to keep making those memories because you obviously are, really, no matter what the music you're singing is. Yes, there is this style, and I feel like there will always be certain stylistic traits that will keep on going. Um, and rules or not, I feel like there's always going to be some degree of that there. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately who you're singing with. I don't mean to negate everything I've said around, well, there are different, styles and, is it just a cappella? And like, barbershop does have all these special things. I don't think it's going to lose any of that or its capacity to make these sort of centralizing moments that connect people across generations and across countries who are fans of the style. I don't think that's ever going to go away. And I think if we can, I say we as if, I'm fully in this sphere. I don't even
You
have a
can speak
VHS
for us on this
membership.
podcast. You're the guest. Go
Oh,
ahead.
shucks. I'll abuse my power then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can really commit without this fear. And I think maybe that sounds like a paradox. Commitment, will always maybe entail some degree of fear. And that's one of the things that makes it powerful, kind of like faith. But it will, if you have faith in the style, I guess, to keep leaning on that word, then I think you also have a belief in this same thing and this phenomenon that these shared memories are going to keep getting made no matter what. So have I guess
Faith. I'm with you on
yeah,
that. The people are what it's all about.
I think it really is.
100%. It's who you're making the music with. And the music that you're making is important and it's integral and it has to be there and somebody's got to do it. And but for most of us, speaking for all barbershoppers, if I may,
Go for
it's really more about the hang. It's so about the hang.
it.
And the hang is so good. Oh gosh, is the hang good. I miss all these people so much. They've
Me
been
too.
so delightful and inspiring and given me something to strive for
Hmm.
as a vocalist, as a musician, as a human doing human stuff like listening to people express themselves or just having a singular purpose regardless even outside of the context of music in all avenues of life. I
Hmm.
have way more connection to that through putting together a competition set with Westminster than pretty much any other endeavor I've ever experienced, I would say.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah. The people, man. The people around you, helping them. They help you. You show up. You care. And you have
Yeah.
the singular purpose, which is facilitated by, on the other side, the devil's advocate of this point is that if the music isn't good, people don't give a damn and they're not going to show up to be part of a community. And so there's the sticky
Hmm.
wicket there. But I feel like barbershop is pretty good at selecting good music. We're in a very transitional period right now. If I could just put in a little 2 cents as a songwriter, I would love to see the Nashville songwriting community find more roots in barbershop society,
Yeah.
as well as the Caroline Shaws and higher echelons of avant garde choral and classical composition. Contemporary, I think, is the word people choose.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny to run with that for a second. That's an interesting line to draw because within certain classical music spheres, you do delineate between, music composed within the last century, or within the last half century, or within the last year even, um, as part of a bigger umbrella that you might call contemporary, or modern, depending on, again, kind of a troubled term, or one that gets used in a bunch of different ways. But more recent, more contemporary versus a historical practice. And thinking back to, we were talking about sort of medieval and early music, it's like there's a clear stylistic divide, and sort of the descriptions and caveats even that go along with those pieces, and sort of the situating of them historically. And what's, I think, so important about that is that they weren't necessarily done away with. And I'm not talking about songs that are particularly problematic necessarily, but certainly were interesting in their day and age, and maybe signaled shifts in musical styles, or social trends, or what have you. And I feel like we can, as we sort of find ways to steer through the many transitions happening right now, is to maybe understand that we are ultimately trying to empower people. Like, yes, at the end of the day, like, ultimately the people is maybe central to it. um, and I do agree that there are certain things that maybe just need to be abandoned. um, and at the same time, there are things that also, if there's a spectrum, maybe there are some things that can be kept, with sort of like the Warner Brothers, caveat, as it were, of like helping situate what it means to the style and what it meant for its history. Maybe you can help me with this, because I feel like there are lots of ways you can go about this. And I think there are always things we can learn. And we do have to acknowledge where things are hurtful or harmful in order to move on. And I think we can find these learning moments, and also find ways to not perpetuate those things that are hurting or harming.
Yeah, I would probably punt to a historian at this time because they would
Yeah,
know how well to couch this conversation.
for sure, for sure.
As a songwriter, I love the idea of pulling from canonical barbershop music what works, what we love.
Mm-hmm.
Things as simple as rhyming schemes, tempos, um, general song structure, and theme, and just creating a new canon as best we
Hmm.
can. Because if we don't, how does this thing move forward? These references are going to be part of any good songwriter's toolkit, and imbued in their soul is going to be the requirement to create new, and the desire to move past singing "Hello, My Baby" until the end of time, even though that's an exceptional. Do you see how I tied it in with Warner Brothers? My brain is working.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you sure did. Yeah, that was much better than what I so thank you for that.
And it's Monday, so like I feel like it's very much an evolve or die possible thesis on this point, where it's like the music is pop music from another era. Generally, like the stylistic tropes of barbershop can be extrapolated to meet the needs of a modern pop audience. It's just that aesthetically they'll be different, but satisfy the requirements of the physical nature of producing interesting sound a cappella with a 4-part ensemble. And it can be done. It can so be done. I know that I can't imagine it not happening, because BHS is in this huge transition period. It's centered in Nashville, which is the center of contemporary conservative pop songwriting.
Mm.
I just can't imagine this not taking hold. I wish it would happen faster because I I think we need it. We need this beautiful land to jump the chasm into, because at
Hmm.
this point in our history, the society and the people that make it up are like just I don't know how to. I can't speak for everyone. I'll just speak for myself. I am gobsmacked at like the amount of just inability to find the center with
Hmm.
with our country and the people that we make music with internationally. And I want I do want togetherness, and I know that it's the material that makes that happen. Character, value set, those can be diverse, and the magic of being in a chorus is that you're all singing the same chart.
Yeah,
And
it's
hopefully,
very
if Kari
true.
arranged it, it's contextualized in the show and in the history of the ensemble. Whoa!
Oh my
Value
gosh.
proposition much. I love it.
If I've done my job, I love that you described this new canon. I feel like if we're getting back to your original question, I feel like that is ultimately going to be the answer. Uh, and that's not to say that it can't, like you say, like there are certain characteristics that will maybe stay consistent, like you say, like certain elements of even good songwriting or good arranging or good chord spacing or tuning or things like that. That maybe we'll never stop rippling forward to rely on our same metaphor from before.
Because they're
uh,
magical. They're magical spiritual experiences, these seventh chords.
oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. But thinking also, yes, of I mean, pop music, I think by its very definition, it's like, yes, you can have sort of a reference to history, but at the same time, you have this thing that, to me, by its nature, I guess I can only speak for itself, seems to evolve very quickly and very naturally, and maybe sort of inherently as popular music, popular to me implies something that is a bit of a moving target. And thinking back to, and again, you're right, we should defer to a historian. But I was, reading through Gage Averill's book a little bit and thinking of in the late 30s and sort of politically, culturally, things that were happening and what might have been inspiring an interest in, Victorian values and sort of the turn of the century perceived comforts of, the small town America and what that meant for um, the anxiety of the times maybe. And we've never really stopped having our own anxieties, but that doesn't mean we can't look forward instead of just only looking back.
I agree. Yes, let's move through the anxiety to a new canon of beautiful, newly commissioned barbershop
Oh my
original
gosh,
song.
there we go.
Did I shoehorn your answer into my thesis well enough? Because I tried.
I think you've done it, yes.
This is a great conversation. I'm having so much fun chatting with you, Kari.
Oh my golly, I hope it's all right. Thank you for helping me work through these ideas. I so appreciate your input and your questions.
Oh, right on. Yeah, well, I mean, I find I find it humbling to speak. To go back to the top of this, I do find it humbling to talk to someone who's like so like into like academic study of music, because
Oh.
that's your deal, right? Like you've spent a lot of time like considering very specifically with people who have done so also. Like I'm kind of in awe of like your knowledge. I know you have more knowledge than you're spitting at me right now
Oh gosh.
of music.
It's a very kind assumption on your part. I'll try to sprinkle a little more knowledge, I guess.
Sprinkle me.
Oh man. Well, what's the prompt, my guy? What do we want to think
Gosh, we've
about?
solved so many problems on this episode already.
Yeah,
What
it's
else can we
true. We've
possibly
done a lot of
think
due
about?
diligence. Well, I was gonna say I have a memory for you, I guess, or a little anecdote. I was thinking of I was very lucky in Sirens to be a part of a little quartet, and we went out to like a regional conference contest a couple years ago. I guess the most recent one, pre-pandemic, and I remember being so nervous on that stage. And I think we were just singing like the Kevin Keller "Come Fly with Me," and as you might know or not know, I don't know, in a treble quartet, I tend to sing bass. I just remember getting to like the little bass features, like "Come fly with me, let's fly," and I just like totally lost it. Like I was just so nervous, and I was remember thinking, comparing that experience to being on the sing off, where ostensibly many more eyes, many more cameras, many more lights, like a lot more pressure. And I feel like I was so much more nervous, like wanted to do well. Not that I didn't want to do well in the sing off, but something about the barbershop setting, I don't know. I was just trying so hard, and something about it just felt so different in a good way, from this experience of just being kind of a beatboxer, but just another member in kind of a larger 9 to 10 person group. There's something so different when you're only four and you're especially like for me as the bass, holding down that low end. There's nobody else down there. So there's something kind of wild about that. So I don't know if that's a helpful reflection, but hooray for anecdotes.
Yeah, and if I can spin your anecdote, I would say that you truly care about what your peers think about you.
Oh.
And that's important for making art because your community is what supports and inspires you. Whereas perhaps a televised audience in a contest that's broadcast nationwide might be such a large net that it might be perhaps
Mm.
not inclusive enough of your peer group, and so not quite as inspiring. And then to use Westminster terms, not quite as much stakes.
Stakes. That's a really, really interesting and I think spot on comparison. Yeah, that when especially you go to again, thinking of like, the 10 at international, yeah, you probably know a lot of the people sitting around you. Maybe you're sitting with your chorus or your other, singer friends who are there, and you maybe know the chorus sitting across the way, or there's already so much like camaraderie and community,
And
that
history.
and history and communal knowledge, right?
Yeah.
All those people know, probably the
They
same
know,
folk
and
hats and the
they
same
will remember,
tags.
and they've demonstrated that they do remember.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Stakes, baby. Stakes are
Whew.
up.
The stakes are really, really interesting. That's, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, there's a dissertation right there. Boom, bada bing, done.
Yeah. The heat is on.
It
Perform
is-
in a way you've never done before because this is the real you, the truth.
that is so funny though, the longevity of memory in, I mean, maybe just any hobby. I mean, not any hobby, but like maybe, hobby versus like a professional thing. Although I will say, I feel like, as a gigging musician in New York, I feel like I have this underlying fear of if I mess up on a gig, I'll never play this town again. There's like that element as well. So like maybe there is some memory there too. Tricky.
It is tricky. Yeah, just to an aside from the like temporal considerations of barbershop contest and like a larger but not so large as a televised audience thing, like
Yeah.
I really love, and I hope we don't lose while we transition into a more quote unquote festival experience of contest in the Barbershop Harmony Society, I
Mm.
hope that we do not lose this slow burn. I'll call it the slow burn
Hmm.
because like at many festivals you get in there, you come in hot, like there's so much going on. It's really not quite focused as well. One of the things I love so much about barbershop contests is that it's this every night there's more people available for the party, but not the people that are in the big show. And
That's
so
true.
it's only on Saturday night at the culmination of the festival
Mm.
that you get the big trying not to use some figurative language here, but like there's this sort of like curve of intensity
Mm.
that you don't experience at a commercial festival. When you buy a ticket to Coachella, you might want to see the headliner on Friday more than Saturday, so you get the Friday ticket, or maybe you're trying to impress your date with the VIP package and you get both, you get the whole thing with the tent and all
Hmm.
that blah blah blah. But like with the barbershop experience, with that festival, not only are you creating art with your peers over time and maybe you just join the chorus so it's only 6 months or a year or something, but like even in the festival itself, from the day you get there on Monday or Sunday through that 7 day period,
Oh
there's
yeah.
this very gradual warming up of the social aspect of the afterglows, and it's like it's so beautiful when I don't even have the words to describe it. I miss it so much, Kari. Why is not then now? I want
Oh,
out at
why
the
isn't that
I want the
when will then
afterglows.
be
When
now?
will there be now?
Yeah,
Ah, I love
I
it.
agree. Wow, I feel like I'm smelling what you're stepping in. That
Okay.
yeah, there is this. I mean, especially it's not to say that like it's only because people are getting cut from the contest that obviously it's like there is this warming up of like you say the intensity and the stakes, I guess, of who's left. Like it's you know the best part of the reality show without kind of the more like artificial kind of facetious drama that gets kind of
It is. It's totally the best
created
part
as
of the
part of it.
reality show.
Oh yeah, just the like, oh my gosh, it's coming down to the wire. Like only one will get the rose, and only one will walk away. And all the things you know about the, and again, coming back to institutional memory, it's like all the things you have been watching for these quartets that you know how long they've been, competing and going for the top spot, and what are the politics, and what does it mean in this score, and like, and oh my gosh, the fact that you guys like go out and look up the scores, and like, that you're just extremely aware of that, like, uh, I don't want to say armchair judging because that sounds like a pejorative, but it's like in the best way. Like, I've heard some really accurate scoring come from like the people I've been sitting next to, and it's like, oh, okay, like you guys really know what's up. So there's this just really loving, again, amateur in the best sense of the word, loving attention paid to really all of these aspects and the granularity of these details as, like you say, it heats up toward the end. And then there's so many parties along the way, like, oh my gosh. I mean, again, as an outsider, I can't really say that I've been to
we got to get you a quartet. We got to get you on this contest stage.
Well, yeah, and BHS, you're all stripes now, I believe, right? So someone female identifying like me can even participate now.
That is correct, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Huzzah!
Yes,
well,
please
we'll make that work.
Make it work. Do the show. Make your contribution. Jump in the pool. It's gonna be great.
Gosh. It just does indeed look like a blast. I will say, and maybe that we can tie this into the idea of the whole competition week. And maybe ultimately what we were getting to kind of at the the end of the arc. I feel like there's so much ritual and ceremony, and that becomes really interesting as well. And that's all really communally mediated, even if it's something that, might seem to the outsider relatively mundane, like getting on a bus and entering this thing. It's called a contest pattern, ? And then you make your way to this backstage and you go through all of these steps. And suddenly you're on a stage, and then, a second whips by and you're done singing, and then, you walk off. There's something about all of that it's like you only, you share it with everyone who's also walked on the stage that day, despite, never having sung with them necessarily. So there's something about that ritual. I don't want to say pageantry necessarily, like just for,
I guess it's kind of pageantry, but yeah, it's the ritual that
but
really
in a good way, as making special, as Ellen Dissanayake says, like the idea of ritual and art making really as a bigger topic, as communally making special, as a human species. We are adding special to a thing where there was not special before.
Yeah.
And all the steps leading into and out of that are, you could consider part of the special making, not just the, 6 minutes and ballad and uptune on the stage.
Special making.
What's
it like when you have an ensemble sing your work? Is that special making for you as an arranger?
Oh my gosh, it's so special making. I mean, I'm always just kind of like white knuckle gripped. I hope they enjoy it. Like that at the end of the day is all that I want for them. I hope that they find some fun, something to hook into. And my biggest, worst nightmare would be if, they were, kind of like slogging through an arrangement of mine. Like if it was just a joyful experience, that to me is the signifier that I had failed completely. What's been fun is to work with groups who are working on my charts, and I can at least try to explain some of my, lack of rhyme or reason. And, sometimes I can, help them get into a place, not for any lack of on their part of understanding, but of mine to communicate it. And usually it's neither about, either of our original takes, but rather what did we collaboratively come up with in terms of mediating, well, this won't work, but this will, and I like to sing this way. Can I sing this note here? Can I sing it like this? Can we change the voicing of this chord so that this next thing works well? And those conversations are really where it's at.
Not me. I'm like, here's the arrangement, sing it or don't, not change anything. It's perfect.
Yeah, and I will say that's something I used to be really scared about. It was just like, sorry, if you're going to change any of my notes, then just take my name off, like just drama queen, like it's not mine anymore. And really the thing is that I feel like it's not quite killing your darlings, but it is, allowing some darlings, I'm not really sure where this metaphor is going, just
Kill them,
allowing,
those
kill
darlings.
them,
They're
yes,
always convincing me that I'm better than I am. Those damn
yeah,
things.
damn. No, but letting your arrangement or chart or even a original composition might be the most scary. Letting it live a life beyond you. And I feel like this, gets into a comparison with like some sort of parenthood where it's like ultimately you have to let it fly, and it's going to be on the ensemble to create with it something new, and that will be a thing that you will never truly have any control over, and that has to be an awesome thing. Like my lack of control on the final result is actually the best possible thing, because if they've taken it and melded it with the vision that they wanted the whole time and they've made it work in a way that makes them feel great, that is winning. That is the best case scenario. So that's something that, again, as as an arranger with still plenty of naivete, I feel like it's taken me a while to get around to that idea.
Well, hold on to that naivete because that sounds like on the money.
Ooh.
Yes. No, seriously though, because I mean, it's really not very fun to work with somebody who has expectations for their arrangement. I mean, they do. You have the arrangement in front of you. Like this is the paper, the notes. This is their work, but
Mm.
it is, as you say, the best case scenario when the ensemble melds their whatever it is into the piece and blows their life into it, and then it becomes something that's way beyond your control because that's the magic. That's what we look forward to. I think. I don't
Oh
know. It hasn't
yeah.
happened to me very many times, but I want that to happen more times because then I can look at it and be like, I didn't have to put in that work. Sweet, it function stacked, and I didn't even have to build the second function.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they did that work, but it's like the work that they do of bringing themselves to it.
Oh,
I
sure,
love
they get
those,
it. Sure, whatever their emotional journey, but me as the composer,
but it's about me. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and I gotta say, it took me a while to get over myself in those moments where they would come up with an idea, even just to approach, like I'd written the notes, but maybe they changed the interp around a certain moment, and it was way cooler than what I was thinking. And so, like, getting over my own ego in those moments of like accepting that idea and seeing it for the value that it had, and realizing like I don't need to hold on to what I thought was going to work. Clearly, they found a thing that worked for them, and that's going to be the thing that they do. And that is, again, those conversations are, I feel like, are the most fun, um, because everybody wins and everybody benefits, not just in that moment, but like collaborations moving forward as well. And that's what I've loved working with Sirens on, is like we've done a few charts together now. So I think I have a better idea from, my perspective when I hadn't arranged anything yet, of what they're looking for, what kind of moments they want. And that's always informed by talking with the chorus leadership and the directors and the coaches and whoever's helping shape the concert at that moment. And they actually have a really cool collaboration coming up. Can I share a
Yes, I
little
was
bit
going to
about
try and
that?
segue into promotion. Go ahead, please.
Well, I can't name the song yet, so that's going to be the one thing that you'll have to watch for. But I can name just about everything else, which is it's a very cool multi-track project that they're doing. And it's I was very lucky to do the arrangement of this super cool song that was written by just this incredible artist. Her name is Neela Pekarik, who you might know from a band called the Lumineers, but she is just an amazing artist in her own right. She's written this fantastic musical about Rattlesnake Kate, who is this like insanely badass character in like Colorado history, of this woman who just like destroyed a million snakes and did a bunch of other cool stuff. But that's kind of like the main thing that, is her big reference point. But just like really cool character, historically, and a really cool musical, just and a whole concept album kind of going around exploring her character and her story that Neela wrote and scored and arranged and everything.
Well, awesome. We'll
So
be looking for the Neela Pekarik, Sirens of Gotham, Kari Francis big show coming up, a concept album.
oh gosh,
Listeners, take a look for that in the future. And I think we'll just wrap it up now. Kari, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been wonderful.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And yeah, take a look just for that video. It'll be great. And check out the album as well. Derek, thanks so much. It's been so fun talking to you.
Right on. We'll cut it there, dude. So good. That was an awesome
Is that
podcast.
okay? Feel free to cut out
Yeah.
the awkward like barbershop history stuff. I wasn't
No, we
quite
don't
prepared.
cut anything. We cut
Oh
nothing.
no.
Sorry.
Oh man, I should have done more homework. Sorry. Well, thank you for good questions though. I'm sorry for the wandering
No,
moments.
this was good. It's a long form podcast. You just get in the water and start swimming and talking and talking and talking. And then, an hour goes by and it's good. That's enough.
Cool. Well,
Yeah, this was
thank you.
so good. I really
Oh,
enjoyed
oh,
speaking with you. Yeah.
oh, I enjoy talking to you. It's been so long, and I'm so glad this was such a cool way to catch up and like share ideas, especially about barbershop.
It is. So when do we? Oh, we forgot to do the thing I do at the end of my podcast.
Oh yeah, do you want to do one more
Sorry.
thing?
First of all,
Yeah.
it's not my podcast. It's our podcast. This podcast that I take responsibility for by doing all of the details and
Oh
hosting
man.
and talking to really wonderful, intellectual, talented people like yourself. The thing we do at the end is
Oh.
pick a tag to sing in person when we meet in person
Oh
again.
wow.
And that's your choice, please.
Oh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Dun, 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 dun,
Oh
dun, 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 dun,
yeah.
dun, 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 dun,
Um,
dun.
like well, I don't want to pick one like obviously the ones that are coming to memory are like just like when leaves will fall. Hold on, can I get my phone? Are you recording this?
You
Can I
can
like let
totally
me hold
bide
on.
your time. I'll just tell our listeners about what I had for lunch today. It was a perfectly ripe
Do it.
avocado
Be right back.
full of omega-3 fatty acids. Very, very valuable for fighting cancer and aging and all the other antioxidants junk that you absorb naturally in your day. But when you eat avocado and omega-3 fatty acids, or when you eat proteins like chicken that eat omega-3 fatty acids inside of insects that they naturally forage in a pasture setting rather than being industrially farmed on grain, that's when you have the benefits of that nutrition in your body. And it makes you feel good. And it makes you feel just fully nourished and aware and present. And on top of that, you get the delicious creamy taste of avocado, which is like the most incredible fruit anybody ever tasted, I think. I mean, there's other good ones, but gee, avocado, it's just, it just doesn't even, you can make guacamole out of it if like they're a little bit old, or you can get like, creative and sprinkle some like fancy salt on it and eat it. Like if you just eat, here's the thing. If you just eat avocado, that's eating avocado sashimi. Okay, I killed a lot of time. Kari, you got any tags?
Yeah, I'm back, and I
Just one tag. Your tag that you'll call when we hang in person.
indeed. Well, I don't know if it's called "Have You Heard." It's like "Have you heard?"
I married an angel tag? Yeah, let's do
Married
it.
an angel. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
It's on.
That'll be it. That's it.
I love it. Well, Kari, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely.
Avocados! I love them. Give me all the avocados! Ah! I'd like to thank my guest, Kari Francis. And thank you very much for listening. This is Derek Wayne saying, keep the dream alive.